Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome back. I am firmly convinced that the English language was specifically designed for the words to be able to be reversed to have meaning. Now, we were having a little discussion in the chat before the show started, and we were just joking around like what the next Halloween costumes were going to be for these global elite and the oligarchy and the billionaires. And, just having a little bit of fun. I oftentimes come into the chat 15, 20 minutes before the show starts. And we were joking around because, like, Elon Musk's son is creepy. And he says creepy things. And so we're like, what if Elon Musk's son was dressed up as Chucky? Like, if someone put, like, a Chucky wig on Elon Musk's son and then, like, a knife in his hand, that meme would go viral, wouldn't it? Because it's so fitting. And then we're like, okay, so if his son's going to be Chucky for Halloween, well, what would Elon Musk be? Well, to me, he looks like Jason. He looks like he's wearing a hockey mask. Now, we can joke around about this stuff because Elon Musk likes to gaslight us with his Satan costume 2 Halloweens ago, with an inverted cross on his back and a Baphomet on his chest. So I think it's fair game to, gaslight him back a little bit, right? And then we were like, okay, who would Larry Ellison be? Well, he would have to be Freddy Krueger. Right? So then one of you said, okay, what would Trump be? So then we were like, okay, probably Apollo, and then Melania would be Artemis. That would be perfect because Melania means dark. So Artemis is the moon representation of the sun god Apollo. So that would be like a fitting Halloween ensemble. And then, but one of you said, oh, it would be better if he was Abaddon or Midas. The Midas touch. So that prompted me to look at the word Midas. This was just on the fly. This literally happened 10 minutes ago. I reversed the word Midas to see if it had any meaning. All I did was Google search Midas backwards, which is Sadim, S-A-D-I-M. And look what it came up with. Now, it took a minute for some of you. I know it's early, you guys. I know it's early. But look at this. Sadim, a Marathi word used to describe someone who ruins everything they touch. So instead of turning to gold, it turns to ruin. And look they even have something called the Sadim touch, just like the Midas touch. Wow. So, if you weren't able to tune in yesterday, I had to pull a show down. Actually deleted it off the server. I don't want to risk any strikes on this channel. The reason why is because I could not confirm from Roseacre Farms if, in fact, they used the new DNA Smack the Nation for a specific disease called Merrick's disease in chickens. And she told me they had, in the past, smaxinated for that particular condition, but the DNA smaxine is a new smaxine. It only was approved like last year. So since I couldn't confirm that and she hasn't called me back yet, I just pulled the video down. But needless to say, if this DNA smaxine was approved for chickens, then it's floating around out there somewhere, and some farms are using it, because otherwise, why would Merck create it and develop it if it was not being used anywhere? Correct? So we have to assume that some of these farms are using it. It's crazy. Like I couldn't get a straight answer. I said, is this NASA that I called? Because I can't get a straight answer. No, I didn't say that. I was very polite. But I'm hoping Amanda calls back and clarifies, what in fact is in the chickens. Now, I know these folks are probably going through a hard time. They've got hit with, bird flu. And they were asking the FDA, they were begging them to be able to smaccinate their birds with a non-mRNA smaxine. But they did not get the approval just until recently. So that's the state of the union. Let's get into today's show. Now, it took me a while to see the big picture. We're going to get into scripture today. We're going to get into a little bit of biblical prophecy. And it seems to all be coming together now. We've been observing Trump on this channel for the better part of 9 years. And it appears as though many of his actions are lining up with some biblical prophecy, but not in the way that you might think. I believe this alignment is intentional. I believe it's somewhat subliminal to depict himself as a messianic figure to rule over his self-made version of the rise of false Christianity. Now, I call it false Christianity because nothing in this version of Christianity relates to anything that Jesus represented. Okay, first of all, right off the bat, this prosperity gospel that he's pushing, okay, that's not in the Bible, as well as what the end times are going to look like. There is going to be no golden age in the end times. That's called a false prophet. Now, I had to look all this up, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but I was like, okay, what is a false prophet prophesying? And I looked in the Bible, and I found several verses that the very definition of a false prophet is someone that tells you that everything's going to be okay, that everything is good. That's the very definition given in the Bible, and I'll show all this to you. But I'm setting the stage so you understand exactly what a false prophet is. Because most of us don't realize that. We just think false prophet is prophesying something false. But no, it's specific. They prophesy that things are going to be good instead of the judgment that's coming. So I'll show you those verses from the Bible a little bit later in the show. But apparently tens of millions of Christians chose Trump's it. We all know what the it is. Instead of having faith in Jesus for healing. That was the first big clue that Trump was unlike any other president that I had decoded before this point. Now people say, oh, you have Trump derangement syndrome. No, we decoded Obama. We decoded Bush. We've decoded Biden. We've held all these presidents to account as long as this channel's been around. It's just right now, it's Trump's turn. Now let's put the puzzle pieces together because a picture emerged into my mind when I woke up yesterday morning. We're going to compare Trump's actions to biblical prophecy in Revelation. And so we already covered the choice that millions of Christians made to either have faith or to take the it. And very few churches bothered to warn the flock. Why? Because Trump had already started to loosen up the 501c3 guidelines. He was giving PPP loans to churches, and he dissolved the line between church and state. There was all kinds of funny business going on, and so the churches sided with Trump. Now, we warned people, and we're not even a church. So the church failed people. Now, not all churches did, but most did. And now we see the fallout, and there's no doubt in anyone's mind at this point, if you're even slightly awake, that the millions of people that made the wrong decision are now having issues, aren't they? Now, a few days ago, I gave the example of Africa, which had a fraction of the deaths with a fraction of the its. It's a slam dunk to anyone who has any sense about anything. Now, you may say, well, Casey, people didn't know. It was a chaotic time. We just trusted the medicine. Well, there was a debate in this country, wasn't there? And all the concerns that were brought up by channels like this ended up actually happening to people later. Didn't it? The medical establishment will never admit the scale of it, but we all know, don't we? Because censorship was hiding the true scale. So the information was out there. What stopped people from listening was their lack of faith, their pride, not wanting to be seen like a crazy conspiracy theorist. And that led them to make the decision that they did, and for many, with disastrous consequences. No matter how much we begged the people we loved, we were simply cast aside. And then afterwards, many of you had to watch those very people disappear because they chose to trust a man over Jesus Christ. Now, the deification of Trump also started happening during his first term, or maybe just before he was first elected. The Bible is clear about the sin of man. Let's take a look. It's our first Bible verse today. Good morning, everybody. The Bible is clear about the sin of man. Romans 3:23, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And even when you think you're being perfect, you are still in sin. This is the very foundation of the gospel, that we are sinners and we need Jesus to be saved. So to deny that you're a sinner is blasphemy. It's literal blasphemy. It's an attempt to deify yourself into God status, which is perfect, right? Now, this should be Christianity 101. But for some reason, when, Trump said, I don't need forgiveness for anything because I just do better next time and I haven't done really anything wrong, is blasphemy. Only God himself cannot sin. So saying that you have never repented because you're perfect is an act of deification. Now, I know it might seem inconsequential to some of you, but true believers understand this. And we also understand that the only thing that would cause a person to say something like that is pride and narcissism. To not admit that they're wrong. And we've all been in these kinds of relationships with people where they never admit they're wrong, never admit they made a mistake. Run for the hills. Because people like that cannot possibly be true believers if you lack the simple understanding that we are all sinners. Now, in the second term and the election leading up to it, Trump accepted gifts that further deified him. Remember the golden Trump statue? Remember I think it was actually a golden calf. The Trump golden calf. And then there was the bronze Trump statue that we found, which was 60 plus 60 plus 60 inches tall. And then there was a goat covered in $100 bills with Trump's face on it that said, in Trump we trust, instead of in God we trust. These are all blasphemous gifts and should have been politely rejected, not put on display proudly. Let's go back to the Bible, because then there was the priestly sanctification ritual. Now, I don't remember if we found this or one of you found this. I think I read it in the comment section. Now, another channel could have covered this before we did, but we do have a lot of people that really know their Bible, even much better than I do, that called this out. And you said, that's weird. There's a ritual in Exodus, in Leviticus, Aaron and Moses, and the ear being pierced or cut through. And this was right when Trump's ear got shot through, allegedly. And so we were like, whoa, this is some kind of sanctification ritual. Now, some of you are like, well, how did Trump control where the bullet hit? Well, I don't believe there was a bullet. I believe Trump was aligning himself with this whole Purple Heart meme. And JFK, who was, interestingly, shot on the same side of the face that Trump was. It was the right ear. And here we are. The priestly ritual, they specifically say the right ear. Let's read through some of this. Now, this was a good ritual in the Old Testament, But Trump is reusing it, I believe. He reused it. And subliminally, even people that don't remember these verses, even Christians that don't remember these verses, it's subliminal. It's spiritual. Then shalt thou kill the ram, and take of his blood, and put it upon the tip of the right ear of Aaron, and upon the tip of the right ear of his sons, and upon the thumb of their right hand. Remember, Trump had the bloody right thumb as well? And upon his great toe of their right foot. The only thing that was missing was the toe. And sprinkle the blood upon the altar round about it. It is in Leviticus. And he slew it, and Moses took of the blood of it, and put it on the tip of Aaron's right ear, and upon the thumb of his right hand, and upon the great toe of his right foot. Now, it's interesting because in Hebrew, the word ram or goat is Jedi. Gedi. Now, we covered that in previous decodes. But Trump Jr. depicted his own father, Trump, in the mirror, looking at himself as a goat. And of course, everyone's like, oh, that just means the greatest of all time. Well, Trump is a Jedi, a MAGA Jedi. Wow. Now, there's many more instances of this. It's part of this priestly ritual. And I believe Trump was embodying that. Now, how do we know this? What is this about the Purple Heart? Well, a few years earlier, before the, quote unquote assassination attempt, Trump accepted a man's Purple Heart. A man wanted to give Trump his Purple Heart. He said, "You're a hero." Now, for a man to give another man a Purple Heart is cringy when that person has never served in the military or never even had a close call with death. Again, this was before the assassination attempt. Yet, Trump again graciously accepted a very cringy and weird gift. Now, let me go back into the chat. What would you do? Because, this can't be all about what I think. What would you do if you had never served in the military and someone tried to give you a Purple Heart because they thought you were a hero? Their Purple Heart. What would you do? Let's see what you guys have to say. I know what I would do if I was, the president or a presidential candidate. All right, I'm in the chat, you guys. What would you do? I'll tell you what I would do. I would graciously decline. I wouldn't make a press event out of it. I would graciously decline. And then I would bless that person who tried to give it to me. And I would say, you know what? If I was the leader, I would say, I want to make this world a better place to where there doesn't have to be Purple Hearts. And then I might visit the man's family and thank them for whatever sacrifice that they gave. But instead, Trump's acceptance of the Purple Heart was a ritual because he knew that in the future that he would put on this act with this near miss to seal the deal for his presidency, and everybody ate it up. Then there was the predictive programming that we found before he ever got shot. Remember in the movie Electric City, the trailer that we did, where a robot cat was shot through the ear, and then there was the flag of Iwo Jima behind it in the same scene. Remember that decode? Well, that's exactly what happened at the assassination. Trump shot through the ear and the Iwo Jima scene of the raising of the flag. And that told me that all this was planned. Now, Electric City, of course, was filmed long before that event. The trailer was filmed long before that, yet that's what we saw. You can't make this stuff up. You just, if you have eyes to see it, you see it clearly for what it is. Now, if you don't know about that trailer for Electric City, I think it's called Electric City. It's out now, but the trailer had all this that I talked about. Just go look at the trailer and see for yourself. Put it in slow motion. You see the bullet fly through his ear, and then you see the flag of Iwo Jima scene. Okay? Now, the priestly ritual that we talked about was to seal the deal, to draw in the Christians, again, who probably don't even remember the verse consciously. Let's keep going here, because there's much, much more. Because I believe that Trump's golden age is his attempt at a 1,000-year reign. He's trying to make America the encampment of the saints. Now, how can I say that? Well, let's unpack it. The wall, the golden dome, that's an encampment. Now, it might not be, of course, it's not the encampment of the saints, but subliminally, the Christian followers are going to believe that that's what it is. Think about it. The calling down of fire from heaven. That will be the Golden Dome missile system, just like the Iron Dome. You can call down fire from heaven. And the whole peace and security and safety for the 1,000-year reign? How's that going to happen? Well, that would be brought about by artificial intelligence. A golden age of an arbitrary rule of law that doesn't see color because it's all algorithms. Do you see the problem here? Now, the timeline in Revelation, we're in Revelation 20 now, says that Jesus comes first before the 1,000-year reign, which would put Trump squarely in the second coming of Christ seat for many of his followers. Now, of course, there are all the memes of people like worshiping Trump as some kind of messiah. We don't need to go through all those. You guys all remember it. This goes deeper than that. They might even, in their mind, rationalize that Armageddon already happened during World War II. So, who would the beast be then? Well, Revelation tells us who can make war with the beast. Well, you can't fight an algorithm. You can't fight a machine. You can't fight an artificial intelligence. They've now got swarms of drones that will overtake any enemy. Split-second decisions and calculations. I believe, and I don't know this for sure, but I believe that artificial intelligence may be the beast. And anybody trying to replace Christ, that would make them the Antichrist. Remember, it's Jesus who comes in and defends the encampment of the saints. Now, Trump is already purging all undesirables, purging all of the negative people out of America from federal jobs, the illegals, and this all needs to happen. But to what end? Will the people that are left over be the perfect citizen, the perfect worker that Trump keeps talking about, that is advanced, intelligent, and brilliant? You guys, that's kind of scary. Okay, that reminds me of an age in the 1940s where a particular person was saying all the same stuff. Super people, pure people. It's a different way, but it's kind of the same thing in a different way. Not everybody can be super intelligent and sharp like that. Look, we all know we have people in our lives who are incapable of some of this high level of being an American that Trump is calling everyone to be. It's one thing to say this is what we should strive for, but to say if you don't make the cut, you're fired. Is that the America we want to live in? Not everybody can go to college. They don't have the intelligence to do it. Not everybody can do things the way Trump thinks. He wants high performers. So where does that leave the rest of us? where does that leave the rest of us? Not every American being highly intelligent, overqualified in their position. So they just get fired? Is that what he's saying? Now, I'm not defending DEI. I'm not defending efficiency. I'm not defending any of that. I'm simply talking about the rest of us. So, what's going to be left in America, in Trump's mind, are the saints. People that are inhumanly sharp, like the press secretary who never stutters, and all the rich oligarchs who sound like they're reading off a teleprompter. I mean, these people are too polished. Okay, so you should be happy. That means things are getting done. These people know what they're doing. No, there's a dark side to that. Now, is Trump performing signs and miracles? Yes, he is, or he's about to. He's about to. A cure for cancer using artificial intelligence. Cutting waste where no other president could or wanted to, which is kind of like turning the money tables over subliminally for his followers, is the way they see it, probably. And of course, Doge, which backwards spells the E-God, the electronic God, instead of the real God. Musk even made the claim that he could one day cure paraplegics so that they could walk again, just like Jesus did. We decoded a movie, didn't we? That seemed to represent Elon Musk. And basically what it was some kind of brain chip that they put in this guy. You guys all remember the movie. Maybe you can help remind everybody. They put a brain chip in this guy in the movie. He was a paraplegic, and then he was able to walk again. And he's sitting in his wheelchair, and the Elon Musk type character is standing in front of him. And the guy literally gets up out of the wheelchair and walks. Now, in the movie, the guy had blonde hair. And of course, Elon Musk has like brown hair. But we got the drift, didn't we? Because this is exactly what Elon Musk is doing. The Neuralink is being tested in paraplegics. He's going to try to make it so he can make them walk again. So, all of this reeks of blasphemy. It's all the stuff that Jesus did, but they're not giving any credit to Jesus or relying on Jesus for these powers. They're using technology. Now, we all know that Donald means world ruler. And we all saw him claim that he was the king, pretty much the king of the world on the Time magazine cover. So now that you have a clear picture in your mind about Trump's actions, let's go back into the Bible and let's read Revelations and see if we can see the connections. Revelation 20, and I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. Now we saw many times Trump pull out keys, literal keys like golden keys, and hand them out during his first term. And these keys were given to Netanyahu and other people. What's up with the keys? Let's keep reading. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. And after that, he must be loosed a little season. We're going to talk about that at the end of the show, the little season. And I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus and for the word of God, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands. And they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. Now let's back up to this beheading part. Obviously, that's the Noahide laws. Many of you have asked me to talk about that. I just thought it was something that was just known, but we probably need to address it because the Sanhedrin just sent out a letter to Trump thanking him for appointing Paula White. Many of you have already seen the letter, and congratulating him on the next step toward the Noahide laws. They literally mention the Noahide laws in the letters to Trump, which of course we all know includes the beheading part. Now, Trump has not responded to the letter, but the fact that they're saying that he is one step closer with the appointment of Paula White is troubling, to say the least. Let's keep reading. But the rest of the dead lived not again until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. Now, this part's important, the rest of the dead, because it means that there was a resurrection before the 1,000-year reign. So, where are the people who are resurrected if, as some claim, we are in the little season? I haven't been resurrected. I was born from my mother. Have you been resurrected? Do you know anybody who's been resurrected? The rest of the dead resurrected. Do you know anyone who's been resurrected? I don't. But the rest of the dead lived not again until the 1,000 years were finished. So if the 1,000 years are finished, where are the resurrected? Nowhere. Which means we cannot possibly be in the little season. Right? These are people not inside the encampment, not in the 1,000-year reign. Now, let's keep reading. Blessed and holy is he that hath part in the first resurrection. On such the second death has no power, but they shall be priests of God and of Christ, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison, shall go to deceive the nations, which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is of the sand of the sea. Let me ask you this question. How did Satan deceive the nations if we're in the new earth after Armageddon? Well, the evil ones were resurrected to judgment, and they will align again as nations to surround the encampment of the saints. So Satan has to gather them together. And the reason why this number is of the sand of the sea, a multitude, doesn't say multitude, but it says of the sand of the sea, which almost sounds like infinite, right? Is because it's all the men from all time resurrected for this battle. We're talking probably 120 billion people that have ever lived on earth. Let's keep reading. And the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. And this is where we get a clue. This false prophet and the beast, they were already destroyed at Armageddon 1,000 years earlier. Let's read it again. And the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone. This is after the 1,000 years, where the beast and the false prophet are. They're already there, and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. So, if the saints already reigned the 1,000 years, what were they reigning over? It wasn't over earth, because history was never at peace. You guys, we have genealogies. I can track my own genealogy back 500 years with pictures going back as far as they made cameras, written documents, pictures of written documents that are literally in my family's possession. Things that couldn't have been faked. They've literally been held on to for that long. And many people have stuff from their families from 800 years ago. You can't fake that stuff. And that's a lot longer than a little season. 500 years is not a little season against the backdrop of the total 6,000 year history since Adam. Think about it. Think about it. Would God call a little season an entire day in the 6 days of creation? And I pulled up this timeline because this kind of shows us, where did it go? This kind of shows us what's going on in terms of the timeline. Let me find it. Okay, I think it's here. Here it is. Here's the timeline. Okay, there's about 6,000 years in Earth history. Okay, and it matches the 6 days of creation. So it makes sense that the next 1,000 years will be the rest. We're right at the edge, right? I mean, think about it. Why would God make 6 days of creation and 1 day of rest, and that not match the history of the world? 4,000 BC, Adam and Eve. Now, of course, this is fluid. You're talking plus or minus 200 to 500 years. This is not exact, but it's the closest thing we have. Okay. So you've got Adam and Eve at 4,000 BC. We're in 2000 AD. That's 6,000 years. That's the 6 days of creation. Okay. And if you think about it, what would a little season be against a backdrop of 1,000 years? Because that's the only time frame that we really have to compare a little season to, because it doesn't tell us what the little season is or how long it is. Does it? Now, we could say could be as little as a little season, could be as little as a year maybe, but it's not going to be 500 years against the backdrop of 1,000 years. That would be too long. That's not a little season. A little season is going to be between 100 years and maybe 1 year. And so if I can track my lineage with pictures and everything back 500 years, where's the little season? It's too long. It's too long. This is not a little season. And again, I can only track my lineage back 500 years. Many of you can track it to, there's people in England that have in their possession stuff from 1000 AD. Pictures, documents, deeds, grants, this, that. There's no missing time. There's no missing 1,000 years of their ancestry. So where is this little season? It's too long of a time period. Now, if there was some big gap in all those documents, let's say 200 years ago, and all of a sudden, all the documents on Earth were burned. We have no documents between this period and this period within the last 200 years. They might have a case, but there's no case. Okay. Heck, my great grandmother goes back 150 years, 120 years, 150, 200 years. People that I've actually seen and talked to. That's not a little season. That's too long compared to the 1,000-year reign. The 1,000-year reign is our litmus. It's our point that we can reference. It's our reference point. So the 1,000-year reign is mentioned, and then the little season is mentioned. So the little season has to be much smaller than the 1,000 years, right? Again, making it at the most maybe 150 to 200 years of the 1,000 years, but probably realistically 10 years at the most. If you're being, rational and reasonable. Now, let's go back to let's see, where are we at here? Now, I wanted to unpack that so you can use your critical thinking, okay? There's no huge amount of missing history in the past 200 years. There just isn't, if you're thinking rationally. So, where are we at here? Let's double down on this false prophet thing, okay? So, what did the false prophet prophesy? Well, Revelation doesn't tell us what the false prophet prophesied. But other books of the Bible do tell us what the false prophets prophesied. Jeremiah 23, 9 through 40, and Ezekiel 13, both false prophets prophesied peace when there is no peace. That's Trump. He is prophesying peace when there is no peace. That would make a false prophet. This is the very definition of a false prophet in the Bible. Now, again, Revelation doesn't tell us that the false prophet would prophesy peace, but the prophets do tell us, Jeremiah and Ezekiel. And these are people that Jesus listened to, or at least quoted. So we have to believe that this is the definition of a false prophet. And maybe this is why Revelation says that when they say peace and security, that's a false prophecy. That's when sudden destruction will come, because they're saying a false prophecy. This is where you have to use critical thinking in the Bible. Okay? Now, what else is going on here? What about the frogs of Revelation? Well, let's read. See, where are the frogs? I think it's in Revelation 19. Oh, wait, hold on. Oh, I wanted to show you this first. These are the words used to describe little season. Micron, chronon. Micron means tiny or for a little. Micron, chronon. And let's find the frogs. Now, the Bible identifies two frogs. Well, no, the Bible identifies three frogs coming out of the mouth of the false prophet, the beast, and the dragon. Right? That's where the frogs come out of. And we've already identified two of the frogs. Trump was identified as the Keck frog. And then Musk later came out and said that he was Keckius Maximus, a frog. So you have to ask yourself, is Musk the dragon and Trump the false prophet? And will a frog come out of AI if it is the beast? I don't know. But check this out. You ready? World's first living machine created using frog cells and artificial intelligence. Literally, a frog came out of the mouth of AI. This was in January 15th, 2020. And here is what it created using frog cells. I'll put a link to this story, you guys. Wow. This is insane. Oh, here's the verse here. Sorry, I was in Revelation 16. Let's read it. And I saw three unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon and out of the mouth of the beast and out of the mouth of the false prophet. And so we have artificial intelligence, literally a frog coming out of its mouth. Now, here's what we do know. We're just comparing the two. We're comparing Trump to Revelation. Trump is claiming that AI will bring peace, health, and long life. And Musk is working on transhumanism so that people can live forever. Let's get into the tree rings. We can currently observe in the last 50 years, they've cut these trees open, the oldest trees to ever exist on Earth. And when you count these tree rings, 2 per season, because there was a lot of disinformation out there. Casey's counting rings. He doesn't even realize that there's 2 rings per season, so that throws the numbers off. No, I was accounting for that. Scientists, they're not stupid. They're not going to claim 1 ring equals a year. They counted 2 rings per year, and which dates the trees back to 5,000 years. Now listen closely here. 5,000 years. Let's go into our timeline. Remember, we're using critical thinking. We're looking for missing time, a missing 1,000 years that everyone's claiming already happened. Here's the timeline. If a tree is 5,000 years old, it puts the tree right here after the flood. It matches the biblical history. The birth of the first trees that would be able to grow after the flood, right? Because everything was covered in water, it all died. So it tells us the history of the world by looking at the trees. Everything after the flood was new growth. And some of these trees, these oldest trees that they've cut open, they could see that 5,000 is as far back as these trees go. There is no extra 1,000 years anywhere written in these tree rings. So the post-flood trees tell us the truth. Now, how else do they tell us the truth? Well, people who believe in the little season believe that Armageddon already happened, that 1/3 of the earth was already burned up, that there was probably a second flood, which the Bible tells us cannot happen because God promised he would never flood the earth again when Noah got off the ark. And none of these events is evident in these oldest tree rings, because that would clearly show us that some of these events already happened, right? You would have what they call a burn event in some of these tree rings, and they're just not there if 1/3 of the earth was burned up. Now, the little season believers will simply say that that particular tree was not affected by any of those events. It was outside of the burn area, or it was not affected by Armageddon. Or some will say also that we're not living on the new earth yet. Now I ask you this, if Jesus already came back and the saints are in the encampment, what were they reigning over for the last 1,000 years if there was no new earth? What were they reigning over? Where in this timeline is the 1,000 years that they were reigning over something? There isn't. Now, of course, the Bible only brings us to the time of Jesus, right? We can look at that history and we know that as believers. So we have 2,000 years since Jesus of what some would say is missing history. But again, many people on earth can track back their own personal family histories, some as close to 1,000 years, which is much longer than a little season. And nowhere in their records, these documents, is there a mention of saints ruling over earth or a time of peace. So, what else is going on, you guys? I hope this puts everything in perspective for you. This is a brand new theology. Okay? This came out of nowhere, like from 5 years ago. People have been talking about this, messing up the timeline, and it's confusing a lot of people. It's confusing a lot of people because now there is no concrete biblical last days prophecy. It's almost like a take it or leave it, or pick and choose which prophecies they think might be in their mind. These are the little seasoned believers, may or may not be brought to bear at this time in history. They think, oh, there may or may not be an antichrist, or there may or may not be a false prophet. Whereas those of us who know where we are in the timeline, we know these things are going to happen, and so we're looking for it, right? So these are the two, streams of thought when it comes to these theories. And so here we are. Now, what else do I have here? Oh, let's address this whole thing about Jesus said to his followers, some of you will not taste death before my return. You guys, Jesus was speaking to those who walked with him, his disciples. And Stephen really was the key for me in investigating this, because I was troubled by that. I was like, okay, Jesus did say that some of you will not taste death before my return and before my kingdom is established, I believe it says. But Stephen was the key, wasn't he? When Stephen was martyred, at that point, Jesus returned in the clouds. Stephen saw a glimpse of the Jesus' future kingdom. He saw Jesus standing at God's right hand in heaven, which means that he would have already been crowned, right? Fulfilling the promise that some would not taste death. How could that happen if the rest of us and the rest of history had to keep going? Think about it critically. If Stephen saw Jesus at God's right hand in an established kingdom, did that actually happen in our timeline at that very moment? No, because the rest of the New Testament was still written, and other events happened after that. And there was still suffering and pain, and all the rest of the disciples got, martyred. So where was Christ's kingdom? It's a future kingdom. And Stephen got basically fast forwarded till the end. He did not taste death because there is no time in heaven. This is why Jesus was able to say, it is finished. And this is why God was able to describe in detail in Revelation the end times, because all this has already happened. We're just not seeing it because we have to live through the timeline. So, Jesus telling them that they will not taste death, that was to his disciples and maybe others who walked with him. And they probably saw Christ's kingdom return at their death. They probably saw the same vision that Stephen did. Now, there are theories out there dismissing this explanation that I just gave you and saying that, that was different. That's different than the second coming of Christ that he was referring to. It's not the same. That was just a vision that he had. It's different. Now, it's up to you to decide who's telling the truth. But I think it's a lot more believable, what I just told you, than thinking that the Antichrist already came, that the Battle of Armageddon already happened, that the Mark of the Beast already happened to buy and sell, and that a third of the earth was already burned up, that fire was already called down by heaven already, and that the dragon and the false prophet and all the other biblical prophecy already happened before the last disciples died in 70 AD. Because if you believe that all that already happened, then your mind starts to pick and choose what to believe about the deception that's happening right now. Because your mind says, there may or may not be a copycat Antichrist, or there may or may not be a mark of the beast. And it leaves the door open to not expect these things to happen. Whereas when you're in the correct timeline, again, you know these things will happen. And you can solidly identify it and steer clear of it. So, that's what I have to say about all this. I've addressed some of this before, but this false doctrine is rampant in our community. It breaks my heart. Some people that I know very closely are spreading this stuff around. And the body of Christ is completely confused. And this will crack open the door to believe Trump. They won't see him as a false prophet. They won't see him as a dangerous person. They'll say, maybe, since we're in the little season, maybe he is, Jesus come back and he's going to defend the encampment of the saints. Do you see how the door has been cracked open for a deception? Do you see? I hope you do. Thanks for sitting through that. This is a tough subject for me, but God challenged me. He said, you need to tell the people about this because there are whole channels based around this, you guys, about this little season, the whole channels. Now, I reached out to some of my counterparts. I said, you guys, we need to say something about this. We need to put together something. I haven't heard back from them. Nobody wants to touch this. They like to dabble in the little season because it's popular. It's popular. And so it's, as a leader, I have to call this out. And I hope what I said made sense. The takeaway is, here's the hugest thing that we covered today that proves we're not in the little season. 1,000-year reign. How much of 1,000 years would be a small portion of that 1,000 years, which would be a little season? The most you could ever try to justify would be maybe, 100 years of that 1,000 years. 1/10. That would be maybe a little season. And all of us know our great grandparents and grandparents that were 200. We can track back people that our mothers and fathers and grandparents knew and walked around with. There were no 1,000 years of peace. Back 250 years. That's a lot longer than a little part of 1,000 years, a little season. Okay. So that is the takeaway. So I hope this helps some people. Look, I'm open to having a discussion. I think I've been pretty polite about laying out this case. I haven't attacked anybody. I haven't been mean and nasty. I haven't made huge accusations toward the people that do believe in the little season. So I expect the same in the comments. If you get mean and nasty with me, you'll just be deleted. If you want to have a discussion, lay out your case, you're welcome to do that. Okay. So that's where we'll leave it with that. All right. I'm in the chat, you guys. You don't know anyone who can go back before 1700s for their lineage. Okay. Well, that's because we live in America. So the people that go back that far, it skips back over to England. But if you talk to anybody from England, they have literal documents going back to, some of them, to the 1600s and before. Okay. We live in America. So our history is a lot less succinct, right? But even back to the 1700s, that's a lot longer than a little season of 1,000 years. Okay. Thanks for being polite about raising that objection. That's what we're here to do. Have a discussion. Let's see here. What else? The earth was divided in earthquake and not a second flood. Yeah, God is clear. The whole promise he made to Noah was, I will never again flood the earth. And he set a rainbow in the clouds as a covenant and a promise. So, then I hear the mud flood people. They're like, there was a second flood. Well, that's not what the Bible says. And then they try to justify it. They go, well, it didn't cover the whole earth, but it covered portions. Okay, which is it? Did it cover the whole earth or didn't it? I'm not saying that I don't believe that there, might have been parts of the earth that had flood waters in them, but that didn't cover up everything to hide 1,000 years, as I just demonstrated in today's show. I just showed you proof. There's no room in the timeline. See, LAB has lineage back to the 1400s. That's a lot longer than a little season, isn't it? All we have to do is step outside of emotion and trying to soften what the last days are going to be, because that's what really it is. Little season is a play to people to make you feel like, you're going to be safer than we really are. It's completely going to unprepare you for any kind of hardship that we have to go through. So, yeah, I'm not saying I don't believe in the Tartarian stuff. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, people are, they're using that as the justification to quote unquote prove the little season theory. That's what I'm saying. And so in that way, it's a deception. All right. Again, Christ came to the people that were around him in a vision when they died, so they did not taste death, just like Stephen. Stephen was beheaded. Now, again, people will say that that was different. That wasn't Christ's second coming. Well, it kind of was. He came a second time to the people that were dying. So that's the way I look at that. All right, you guys, I'm going to pop off of here. I love each and every one of you, and I could probably see you on Sunday. I'll put links to all this and all the scriptures and the timeline and the proof and everything. Probably do it between the headline show, like lighten things up a little bit on Sunday, because I'm sure there's going to be stuff to cover with the Trump tracker. Okay, I love you guys. Have a great rest of your day. Much love.